Welcome to the Expert Edge. This is the show where we bring on experts in the fields of health and wellness practice. We hear their stories and we learn what they see working in the field of diabetes reversal and prevention. I'm happy to introduce today's guest, Cathy Katin-Grazzini. Welcome, Cathy.
Thank you, Lucia. Thanks so much.
For some of you, Cathy is not new. She's not the first time that we've had her as a guest. But in case you haven't met her before, she is a sustainable chef and author of a new cookbook called Love the Foods That Love the Planet, Recipes to Cool the Climate and Excite the Senses. And she also has several other cookbooks. And so that's one of the things she does as a culinary instructor, where she teaches about the environmental and the nutritional impacts of our food choices so that people can take steps towards a greener, healthier lifestyle. And these foods that she is featuring in all of her work are plant-based. And so, as we all know, that is an excellent direction to go when you're looking to reverse metabolic diseases like metabolic syndrome, prediabetes, diabetes. And so I wanted to bring her on because she's got some resources that I think would be helpful to you if you're looking at figuring out how to include more plants in your diet. But before we dive into the meat of our interview, why don't you tell us just a little bit about how you got started in your interest in the intersection of lifestyle and health, Cathy?
Sure. Yeah. So my own journey began back in 2013 and it was really a health scare that my husband had that was our entryway. He had a lot of things going. He's a young man, very physically active, not overweight, and yet he was having one infection after another. His appendix, his prostate, his thyroid. It was just 1 year from hell. And it culminated in what turned out to be a huge blockage of plaque in the artery under his collarbone, of all places, just oddly, which necessitated a surgery. And the surgery turned out to be it kind of went sideways, and he needed a second emergency surgery the next day. And anyway, the whole thing, and we realized at that point he had atherosclerosis. We had no idea. And that whole experience was so horrific. It catapulted us into what can we do because a life of surgeries, atherosclerosis can lead to heart attack and our leading killer, or stroke. And we certainly didn't want more surgical interventions and stents, even though that he didn't need one, but that would be in his future if we just allowed life to continue as we were going. We were vegetarian. We thought we were eating the Mediterranean diet, we thought, hey, we're doing everything right. And yet there was a tremendous amount of inflammation in his body, as it turned out. So got home, did some research, found the whole world of plant-based nutrition and all the wonderful people working in this arena. And we flipped our lifestyle kind of overnight, because I was determined that I wanted him in my life and I wanted him to have a full life. And he was right on board there. And I went back to school, became certified in plant-based nutrition through the Cornell program, went to culinary school. I always loved to cook. We had lived for years in Italy. He's from Italy. And so cooking was a passion of mine anyway. But I thought, well, if we're going to be cooking without oil, without salt, without sugar, let's make this as gorgeous and appealing as we could. And so I did the culinary training through the plant-based program through Ruby Cooking School. Anyway, that was years and years ago, and set me on a whole new sort of path. My physician became very interested, and I ended up changing careers, and I devoted the rest so far, this part of my life going forward, to really exploring culinary traditions from all over the world and how to make these wonderful traditional dishes as very healthy as possible so that we all can take advantage and make it a joyful journey for people to improve their diets for diabetes, for heart disease, for cancer, for autoimmune conditions, for the whole panoply of degenerative chronic illnesses that are so epidemic in America and many other countries as well at this point. So
Absolutely.
that's my background. Yeah.
I love that. And you really were motivated. That's obvious. But I love what that has done in your life as you have been able to contribute to this entire genre of culinary arts where people are really turning for answers when they have found that maybe traditional medicine isn't providing all the answers they need and realizing that they actually have a great deal of power over their own health outcomes by choosing to, for example, eat differently, which is kind of where you have focused.
Right.
And you have just recently released your new cookbook called Love the Foods That Love the Planet. Could you tell us what it's about? There we go. Yeah, now we can see it.
Yeah. So, I had another cookbook a couple of years that came out that was called Love the Foods That Love You Back. And that's all about the health journeys and, eating for our health. But in the interim, over the last several years, I've grown more and more concerned and worried about the climate change, and how it is destroying lives and homes and livelihoods of people in this country and all over the world. And what in the world could we do? We're sort of prey to a climate that is spinning out of control. And even though there have been, a lot of people working diligently in this field, the climate keeps overheating, and we're having more increasingly frequent and more violent extreme weather episodes, like we just had the hurricanes, the last two hurricanes in Florida, and that impacted North Carolina so horribly, and the fires out west, and the flooding, tornadoes, and the droughts, the whole shebang. And I really wanted to understand it, from the food perspective, to look at what we eat and what we're growing and how we source it and how we cook it and how much of it do we waste, and what could the home cook, the folks at home do to make a difference? Is there, and it turns out there's quite a bit that we can do to really help alleviate some of the pressures that are really becoming urgent in the climate right now for ourselves, for our kids, for our grandkids, because this is the only planet we have. And we really have to all do our bit at this point to bend the climate curve as best we can.
So in your exploration, what was the connection that you started to see between what we eat and many factors that seem to be affecting our climate?
Yeah, so this was really unexpected because I was coming at this, really not knowing very much. And I had a lot of, like most of us, myths and preconceptions that, turned out to be off base. So I discovered that the food sector is responsible for over a third of greenhouse gases. And, those are the greenhouse gases that are created from the burning of fossil fuels that are really fueling the overheating climate. And that's a big part of the climate puzzle. It's not the biggest part, the use of fossil fuels and energy impacts agriculture and every other aspect of our lives, but over 1/3 is pretty darn big, and you didn't hear much talk about it when I began looking into this. And I discovered that I had thought the most important impact for the climate on emissions would be transportation, eating locally. And I think it is a great thing to do. And transportation does play a role. And certainly it's wonderful to support our local farmers for a variety of reasons. But in terms of the main drivers between food emissions, was not transportation. What really is driving the high emission rates in the food sector comes from the use of land. How much of the land is lost because of cutting down of forests, because of draining of wetlands for agriculture, an awful lot, as it turns out, and that's a huge driver. Also, how much energy is used in the farming, the agricultural sector, on the farm or ranch itself, how many inputs, pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, soil amendments, irrigation, all of these factors require energy, and that energy right now is pretty much coming from fossil fuels. So that is another huge driver of what is so environmentally costly in agriculture. And the third part of it was really mind-blowing, because it was how much food is wasted or lost all along the food supply chain. And it turns out over a third of what we grow or what we raise is lost or wasted. And some of that is in our own kitchens, which is where I focused in the book. But a lot of it is all the way through from production, all the way to the landfill, has an impact. So those are the three main drivers that we can, and then I went further and I tried to really figure out, okay, well, what specific foods are problematic because they are using the land so intensively farmed agriculturally, or a lot is wasted, just these unsustainable practices. And came out at the very top of the list, which I really didn't know exactly what I was going to find, was livestock. First and foremost was the ruminant animals, very top of the top, the beef cattle, the lamb and mutton, the animals that they're ruminants, they chew their cud, they have second stomachs, they produce methane, as well as the land use and the crops that are grown to support them. They also have a problem with releasing methane into the atmosphere, which is a very polluting greenhouse gas. But it's not just animals. So animals are way up there. Processed foods, the more processed our foods are, the higher they are because of all the energy inputs that go into refining and doing all the things that ultra processed foods entail. But there are some plants as well that are up there either because of their popularity, they're grown unsustainably. Farmers, to meet international global demand, are clear cutting forests and doing other things just to respond to the demand from the market. And quinoa, for example, is a casualty of that. It's not at the very top of the list, but it's much higher than it used to be when it was grown sustainably locally for the local peoples of Peru and the rest of South America. And in the book, I go into all the specific foods and how to source them, because some foods are really beneficial for our health and for the climate if they're grown sustainably. And they're not always grown sustainably. So I really go into them so that we can make informed choices about how we shop and what we're eating. But by and large, the foods that really come to the bottom of the list, that are the low emitters, are the simple fruits of the earth, the vegetables, the fruits, the whole grains, the beans, if they're grown sustainably, and most of them are. The fruit trees, the nut trees, the seeds, all of these absorb carbon, or they don't require a lot of energy intensive inputs to grow. So really, and a lot of people that are eating plant-based are already doing a lot of things right. If they're favoring plant-based foods that are not highly processed, you already ahead of the game. But this book is really designed for everybody. Our relatives that are not eating sustainably, but are worried about the climate. Because 64% of Americans are worried about the climate, and a certain proportion of them are even suffer from an anxiety about climate change if they've been in areas that have been directly affected by these horrific climate events. it can be really scarring for people. You lose your home, you lose your job, you lose a lot. And unfortunately, that's going to increase. So that's a long answer to your question, but it's there's so much we can do for the climate by changing how we eat.
And I really appreciate how you kind of link together the concepts of we can actually eat well and take care of the earth. So it's not one or the other. And
Exactly.
a lot of that is about educating ourselves on what are choices that are actually healthy, both for the earth and healthy for us. And why not make choices that are win-win solution? And
Totally.
it's so interesting. You talked about, for example, deforestation, and it has, like, as I was thinking about that, almost a double impact in that the loss of trees impacts the climate negatively, but the loss of trees is often for the purpose of bringing in more livestock, and and thus really increasing the amount of animal food products available for the world's population. And so it's like a double whammy. And I grew up in the rainforest of the Amazon, and I remember flying over the Amazon for hours where all you could see were those tall green trees. And now I look at aerial photos coming out of so many parts of Brazil, especially along the Amazon, and how the earth has just been stripped of all of those beautiful trees. In fact, I had a really good friend that lived next door to us when we were in Peru, and her father loved nature. And we met up with him here in the last year or so, and we were reminiscing. One of the things we had done as kids was collect leaves from the different rainforest trees that grew in our area. And as we were talking about some of those, her father shared, he's now in his 90s, but her father shared how some of those trees that were so common when we were there as kids, even there in the part of the rainforest where we were, have disappeared. And you just can't even find them anymore. So this is really something that has become a growing problem. And I appreciate the fact that not only are you giving us ways to help take care of the earth, but also to enjoy our foods while we do it. So tell me more about the range of recipes that readers can find in your book.
Yeah. So, well, it really is soup to nuts, so to speak. So there are the recipe chapters in the book. I'll just zip through the number of them. There are 8 of them. We start with seasonings and sauces, and condiments, and plant-based mayonnaises and spice blends, and all the different ingredients that we might enjoy in and of themselves, but also used in other recipes. So that's chapter number 1. Number 2, let's see, we have starters and small bites. So this is finger food, fun food, party food that we might have as appetizers or to kick off a party or start a meal. And then I go into soups and salads and soups and sandwiches. So that's the 3rd chapter. And this is in Michigan, or I don't know what your weather is like right now, but ours, Connecticut, is where I'm at. It's really peculiar. We were freezing last week. Today it's 80 degrees. So I don't know where we're going, but it's all soup season. So it's getting to the time of the year, which is a favorite of mine. And then there's a whole chapter on side dishes, which are legumes, bean dishes, or vegetable dishes that are beautiful accompaniments. They can even make a meal out of them oftentimes, but sometimes we have them just to go with. And so there's a whole chapter of those. And again, recipes from everywhere, from Japan to Denmark to, West Africa to Mexico. It really runs the gamut. I'm a food curious foodie. And that's one of my pleasures, is to really explore the wonderful things home cooks, simple, traditional peasant traditions from the land that people have developed over hundreds of years, and to really make them available in a healthy, sustainable way for all of us. Then I have a chapter on main dishes, the entrees. And I had so many recipes there, I broke it into two chapters. And the second one I called Celebrations, because those might be a little more special occasion. Not really, but for some people, it might be a little longer to prepare, or a little more involved, or a little more unusual. So I broke that into two chapters because there were so many. And then I finished with the desserts, of course, because what cookbook would be complete
Right.
without some sweet endings? And they're almost all fruit filled confections or other things that are super healthy sweets. No sugar, no refined sweeteners, all celebrating fruit, and wrapped up in dough, or
Yeah.
And I have a couple of pictures if you want to.
Yes, let's take a look. Let's take a look. I love looking through cookbooks.
Alrighty, so I can
Let's
share.
take a peek.
This is just a little, let's see, a little sampling of just the cover of the book. You're seeing it now.
Yeah.
So this is from the first chapter. This is a mango salsa. So it's a little inspired from South Asian traditions, but also from Latino, dishes from Mexico and Central America. This one is made with mangoes and Thai chili and lime and ginger. So it's an interesting, wonderful, involves all your taste buds, to excite them. And it's great to use that in all different kinds of dishes. It doesn't have to be, an Indian dish or a Mexican dish. You can put it on burgers. You can use it as a dip. It's wonderful on canapes. So it's very versatile, but it's a fun recipe.
Love
this This is from the soup chapter. It's a very they're all eco-friendly, but this one I'm particularly happy about because where I can, I try to repurpose food so we waste less of it and less of it goes in the landfill. And this is my asparagus recoup soup, I call it. But you could also do variations of this with the stems of broccolis or leafy greens or the cores of cauliflower. Many vegetables would lend themselves to this sort of approach. This is with the woody ends of asparagus that are sometimes, just too tough to enjoy eating. But I have a simple way to blend them up into a creamy soup. And it's really velvety and just delicious. And the flavor is amazing. It's just delicate, but so flavorful. And I have it here shown with just some chives and some homemade croutons that, if you don't have, but if you have some stale bread, you can rub some garlic on it and just, cube it. And that does the trick too. This is I always find that salads get, they get no love. People think of salads and they're just bored by salads because, oftentimes it's low man on the totem. You throw a couple of, just salad greens together, maybe a tomato or two or a little piece of cucumber, and that's it. But salads can be so much more. They're really just a cold, room temperature dish. But they can be really exciting and fun to eat. And this is my roasted baby beets with citrus salad, which is really perfect for the fall, which is why I'm including it here, and the winter, because that's when beets are at their sweetest. And this is with baby red beets, and we have golden beets, and I have it with red grapefruit here and mandarin oranges. What else is in here? We have some shallots because give a little sharpness. And for a little peppery notes, I have some radishes and arugula, which I love, those sorts of slightly bitter, peppery foods. And then the little white dots that you might see here and there, that's my soy labne. Labne is a Turkish yogurt cheese, but we're not using dairy yogurt, we're using soy yogurt. And all you have to do is strain it to remove some of the water. There's really nothing more to it, but you can create wonderful concoctions with the strained yogurt cheese. And it's just like a cream cheese. I mean, it's just really phenomenal. And it also is a live probiotic food, by the way, because you make your
Yeah.
homemade yogurt. It's not pasteurized. It's just made with probiotics and soy milk. So that's very easy to do, and that's what I have here with a couple of pistachio nuts and dill to top it off. So that's just a really fun salad, and there are a bunch
Oh,
of them
yeah.
in the book. This is another wintry dish. This is my brassica. What do I call it? I call it my brassica bake, but there's a word before it. Maybe I'll think of it, but it's maybe it's buttermilk brassica bake, because I make I make a buttermilk out of it's in the cookbook as well, and it's really sweet and creamy with a little tang, as it should be. It's also a live probiotic, and I use that buttermilk to make a biscuit. That's what it's called. Yeah, it's a biscuit. So on the bottom is just a little baked biscuit that I make just with a white whole wheat flour, but you could use other flours as well, with the buttermilk and baking soda, baking powder, and it bakes up just a little platform for and top it with broccoli and cauliflower that I douse in a creamy plant-based white sauce and bake it in the oven. So it's
that looks delicious.
Yeah, it's a nice winter hearty, comfort food kind of dish. This
Absolutely.
this is manazale. I love this recipe. Manazale is it originates in Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, that whole part of the Middle East, and it's made with chickpeas and eggplant and tomatoes. And what really brings it to new heights is it is seasoned with a spice blend called baharat, which is there are many variations of it. It originated in Tunisia in northern Africa, and the recipe is in the cookbook in the first chapter for baharat as well, which is just a great sort of seasoning that you can use in all sorts of different stews and whatever, but it's fantastic in manazale, where it just really makes this a wow, sort of mouth-warming, exciting sort of dish. So that's manazale.
Beautiful.
And then a couple of little desserts here. So this is French. This is clafoutis. That's what this dessert is, and this is a clafoutis made with cherries. These are Rainier cherries, and clafoutis, typically is not something we would eat. It's because it's made with white flour and sugar and cream and the whole panoply of things. But this is a really healthy clafoutis. So this is made with a little bit of a gluten-free, I think I used oat flour for the crust on the bottom. It just bakes for a little bit. And then it's a custard that I make with tofu and plant-based milks. And the fruit bakes in the custard. And that's basically everything that's involved in, and you really, you just stuff it full of cherries, and it's got almond notes to it. It's just really lovely.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit, the white on top is my creme fraiche, which again, I make from soy yogurt, just straining it for a little bit. It's so that's a really lovely dessert.
Yeah.
And the last one is for apple season, which is upon us too.
Yes.
And these are my, I call it pretty apple packets, because I kind of gift wrapped them in the dough. So this is just a very simple leavened plant-based, all plant-based, of course, dough made with a whole white wheat flour, and apples. And there's, I use an apricot paste that I make from unsulfured apricots, which is very simple to make. And I use that sort of to laminate in between the slices of the apple, and then just tie it up like a bow. And I give, instructions for everybody. So this is kind of a little arts and craft that you get to play with your food, which I always, advocate. And I think that's everything I have here. Yeah. So that's
Oh, thank you for sharing those. You have my mouth watering already. And that's a polenta, stuffed polenta or something on the
oh no,
cover.
this looks like polenta. So no,
It,
I'm glad you mentioned it. Yeah, not polenta. This is actually a Peruvian dish. This is called
Mm.
causa rellena, and this is potato
Oh.
with ají amarillo, which are the
Mhm.
very fruity, mild, beautiful orange chilies that color the potatoes. It's a cold potato dish traditionally, and there's a whole story that goes along with this wonderful dish that were, there was a war in the 19th century between Peru and Bolivia, and just the neighboring countries that go into it. And this was a dish, and probably a simpler version of this maybe, but that the local women made for their boys who were fighting their battles. They wanted them to have, potatoes were
Mhm.
something, grown in abundance, and they wanted them to have a cold potato dish that they could take with them in the field. And they created this wonderful cows, for the cause. And normally it was filled with fish. But this is my crabless crab meat salad that I make with sustainably grown hearts of palm. That's it, also in the
Mm.
cookbook, and that's what I use to stuff this particular callus rellena. So that's what I use for the cover.
Oh, that's so interesting. So thank you so much for sharing those. I think that gives us a really good overview of the kinds of things we can expect in that book. And wow, I would love to try some of those recipes
Yeah,
right
I just
away.
wanted to share with everybody also that once they see this video, if they email me, and I know Lucia will share the email, I'd be happy to share a couple of these recipes with them.
Awesome.
And so just contact me on my website and indicate that this is where you found out about the book and or saw this video, and that will be my little gift to all of you.
Oh, thank you so much, Cathy. You can stop the share. There you go. And just that way people can see your face again. And I just love what you shared with us today. And just to reiterate and clarify for anybody that's watching the video, look in the description below the video and you will see contact information so that you can tell Cathy you saw her on Lucia's interview and she will send you some of the recipes for some of those pictures that you saw. And her website is Cathy's Kitchen Prescription.com. That will be under there as well. So you can go exploring, pick up a copy of the cookbook, learn more about how you can eat in a way that sustains the health of your body as well as the health of our planet. And I just want to say thank you so much, Cathy, for being with us here today. This has been amazing. And I just want all of you to remember health is wealth, and it comes by choice, not by chance. Thank you for being with us here today.